The takeaways are huge, Lisa. First, if I may, let me read you a quote of what Xi Jinping told Putin as he was saying goodbye to his quote unquote dear friend. Changes are taking place now that haven't happened in 100 years. When we are together, we drive these changes. Putin responded, agreed. So here are the takeaways. First, the two Xi Jinping and Putin are forming a permanent anti-US bloc with China as global center of gravity. What does it mean? Both of them have written what I would call manifestos in their respective state newspapers, outlining their vision, how they see the world. What they want to do, Lisa, is transform the world to shift the balance of power in their own favor, specifically in China's. China is on an upward trajectory and Russia is on a downward trajectory. So Putin specifically kind of signaled to Xi that China is now a higher ranking member of the partnership, if you will. So what they were strategizing about is how do they displace the United States from its top place as the dominant geopolitical, economic, and military power, and that's China's goal by 2049. And so they're planning to replace the dollar with the petro yuan as the dominant currency of international reserves. And more importantly, they want to challenge the United States potentially in a two-theater war. And my intelligence assessment is that Xi would possibly authorize China's incursion into Taiwan during President Biden's first term.
We're often told, Rebecca, that, look, we have to be involved in Ukraine. Because if we didn't get involved in Ukraine, if we didn't take this fight against Russia, then China would see it as a green light to invade Taiwan. But if you're China, wouldn't you want us preoccupied in Ukraine? We've depleted our military arsenal. We've drained our finances. We are distracted right now.
You are exactly correct, Lisa. And I heard you talk about this on Fox. And you just nailed this analysis because all of these pundits, right, they think like Americans, but our adversaries don't think like Americans. Russians think like the Russians and Chinese think like the Chinese. So what Xi Jinping is pondering right now is that, as you said, he has two of its top geopolitical adversaries just decimating each other's combat readiness in a proxy war. So there's this famous Chinese proverb: a wise monkey, and monkey is a symbol of wisdom and shrewdness and intelligence in Chinese culture, right? So a shrewd monkey is sitting atop of the mountain, watching down the valley how two tigers are fighting ferociously. And she's waiting patiently to see how this ends. And this is what China is doing right now, because we are the only country that can intervene and disrupt China's plans to take over Taiwan. And we simply will not have the combat readiness needed and the military arsenal because we are hyper-focused on this Ukraine business. And so Joe Biden and his team are absolutely, incompetent. They're missing the forest for the tree. You're exactly right.
Well, and you've written a lot about some of the steps that President Xi has taken, installing a wartime cabinet, directing his military for war. Is this just posturing, or how real is this threat for the United States?
Oh, it is absolutely real, Lisa. In fact, we are living in the riskiest period in modern history, in my analysis. Here's why: because we face a two-front war and we're simply incapable of fighting it. We do have the doctrine, but we have eroded our capability because our Pentagon is actually focused on pronouns and, teaching Marxist ideologists to our military officers instead of how to win wars. And so She knows this. It is not posturing. He's doing all of the things that we call in the intelligence business INW, or indications and warnings. In plain language, these are the signposts. When we assess, does the country transition onto a wartime footing? There are certain check marks that we're looking for. And China's posture right now fits all those. As you said, he installed back in October the wartime cabinet. He also gave direction to his armed forces to get ready for war. Very, very specifically, he directed them to get all their energy, all their weaponry. Here's what he said: the entire military must concentrate all energy on fighting a war, direct all work toward warfare, and speed up to build their ability to win. So here's what they are doing in order to win. China has beefed up its space order of battle from 250 to 499 satellites. Why is that? It's because every aspect of warfighting right now is conducted through satellite constellation, anything from missile warning to navigation to reconnaissance, command and control. At the same time, China is developing and fielding what we call counter space weapons to, and I quote, blind and deafen U.S. forces. This is part of China's what they call unrestricted warfare concept. And these counter space weapons include kinetic kill missiles, ground-based lasers, electronic warfare systems, and directed energy weapons, and even orbiting space robots. And there's a long list of these items that the Chinese are doing, including developing chemical and biological warfare agents that their artillery could be armed with. And so there's a piece that I've written on the New York Post that is titled "Why China Appears Ready to Go to War with the U.S. Over Taiwan," and I provide detail on all of these steps. So no, it's not posturing. It's actually getting ready for war.
Let's take a quick commercial break. More with Rebecca Koffler. Well, and you wrote regarding that New York Post article, I found this part really interesting. You talk about us shooting down the Chinese spy balloon with a $400,000 missile, pointing out it's an example how China could defeat us by depleting our combat arsenal. And you write, imagine China sending 100 balloons ahead of its attack on Taiwan. How many F-22s would be needed to down them all? Imagine air traffic disruptions across America. Imagine the panic that would ensue.
Yes, exactly. That's, again, part of their concept that they developed actually back in 1999 called unrestricted warfare. And that concept was published and accidentally was published in the open space, and we grabbed it, we meaning the United States and the analysts, and this is considered to be the seminal paper by the Chinese that allows us to glean from their way of war. Unfortunately, right now, there are very, very few experts in the Pentagon who are able to take lessons learned from this. And one of the things that the Chinese wrote about is that the U.S. fighting is old style, the war fighting, because they're shooting birds with golden bullets. This is how they said it. They're shooting birds with golden bullets, just like we shot down the balloon with the very expensive high-tech missile, right? $400,000. That is how they plan to further erode our combat arsenal that we are already doing to ourselves by sending, billions of dollars worth of weaponry to Ukraine. By the way, it's already $196 billion worth of weaponry either sent or promised to Ukraine. Okay, it's an equivalent of Ukraine's entire GDP, gross domestic product, for 2021. And so the Chinese are watching us doing that, and they're developing concepts on how they are gonna stretch us thin, and that's just one of the ways. Another way is to send something like that balloon, but also equip it with either a kinetic or a non-kinetic payload that contains chem-bio. And so this is what specifically they were talking about. They were talking in these doctrinal writings about overwhelming the adversary's healthcare system, hospitals, and creating panic. And so imagine that they equip the balloon with something like COVID-19. This is exactly what happened during COVID-19. It's another, program that the Chinese are running right now. How do they weaponize these types of chimeric viruses through gain of function research? And so we know everything about how they fight the war, and yet we are unprepared because we're just used to throwing money at the problem. We're a very rich country. We have superior weaponry, but the adversary understands our way of war, and they have spent decades on how to bypass our technological superiority that they also believe is our crutch and our vulnerability.
Well, also the Washington Examiner had reported that the, kind of Chinese spy balloon that we talked about is a delivery platform for a potential nuclear EMP attack, and our electrical grid is so vulnerable. It's actually pretty terrifying when you look into it and the damage that could do to America.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yes, EMP, electromagnetic pulse, is another pretty unique, I would say, type of weapon that we just simply don't pay attention to because So here's the belief in the Pentagon. And as you know, I'm a former DIA intelligence officer. DIA is a military counterpart to CIA. And so back in the intelligence community, I warned about the Russian threat, right? I briefed scores and scores of military commanders, DIA, CIA director, President Obama's National Security Council, the White House, etc. But nobody wanted to believe that Russia would do what Putin said himself he was going to do. All kinds of excuses were given to me, no, Russia's not going to do that. And so the same thing right now is happening with China because we believe we're the top dog, which we are militarily, right? And we can potentially deter any adversary or we can fight them. But with the experts, the so-called, experts in the groupthink don't account for is those types of unique strategies, like loading an EMP onto a balloon and a multi-sensor package that is going to collect intelligence and provide it real time to the Chinese. We don't account our just group think mind that dominates in the Pentagon, in the intelligence world, and within the White House, specifically, with the Biden's White House. That's what's going to get us in trouble with the countries like Russia, China. And it's not just that. Basically, Biden created a multi-headed monster right now. It's not just Russia and China. They're joined by Iran, by North Korea, Syria. It's basically a bunch of gangsters right now trying to figure out how do they challenge the United States.
Well, and where does Iran fit into this equation? Because you just mentioned Iran. There's reports that they're very close to being able to build a nuclear bomb. Talk about Iran's growth and, power. I mean, we've seen all these nations, all of our enemies, get more powerful under the Biden administration. So talk about Iran and where they fit into this conversation.
Absolutely. Iran is an ever-going threat. So we just had the report come out a few weeks ago, the 2023 intelligence assessment by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, right? And it spelled out very clearly, unfortunately, it wasn't given too much coverage, but I would direct to you, there's a piece that I provided analysis for, which is on Fox News website. It's called U.S. Mainland Under Threat as Iran Pushes Assassinations, Kidnappings. It's written by a colleague of mine, Benjamin Weinthal, but I provide analysis to that. So nuclear, as you mentioned, is one type of threat, right? So Iran is trying to get their hands on the nuclear weapon, and Russia and Iran right now are very close. They're deepening their partnership. Not only that, China has now orchestrated the normalization of relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia. So, and Russia is the top dog when it comes to the nuclear know-how. It's the top country in the world when it comes to the nuclear arsenal. It even beats the United States. So, if you can imagine if the Russians share that technology with the Iranians, what could possibly go wrong, right? But then another threat that is even much closer, right? Because the threshold for actually detonating a nuclear bomb in the homeland is very high, right? Then very few countries would ever dare to do that, and hopefully would detect something like that. But there's a much simpler threat that is looming right now. And it's reflected in that assessment. Basically, the Iranians are developing clandestine networks inside the United States to target Americans. So there's a report right now that they are planning to effectively penetrate our law enforcement agencies and our government institutions and target for assassination and kidnapping those types of professionals. In fact, we right now are spending millions of dollars providing security to somebody like Mike Pompeo, right? And one of his top advisors during the Trump administration. So, but these people have gotten so bold that they're planning to target, and they have already targeted, like in places like New York. For example, they plotted an assassination of a U.S. citizen, a journalist who published the Iranian government's human rights abuses. They plan to carry out a murder, and those capabilities are growing stronger and stronger. And this is here within the homeland that I'm talking about. So I direct people to check out that piece on Fox News.
I remember that with the journalist. What should we do about all of this?
That's like a $64,000 question that people ask me about usually, right? And my response is, well, first, you can't allow this to happen in the first place, right? It's very difficult right now on the spot, to find a magic bullet to solve the Russia-Ukraine problem. Okay, there's zero chance for Ukraine to win, and we can go, into the reasons why in the next podcast. But that's the thing. And so we slept at the wheel, so to speak. Right, the best way to fight an adversary is to prevent them from attacking a country, from attacking you by developing a robust deterrence strategy. And we didn't, right? So the best thing for us to do right now is to elect people, who will be adults in the room and who could think strategically, rather than, hyper focus on one little problem. We need somebody who looks at the big picture of what's going on right now. And unfortunately, the Biden administration is blissfully oblivious. I mean, look, they just, going back to Putin, right? They designated the International Criminal Court right now, designated Putin as the war criminal. Okay, well, that's going to make everyone feel better. But what does it do in reality? It just basically cuts off a peaceful path for Ukraine. So we're going to have to help Ukrainians fight the Russians until the last Ukrainian standing, right? Because you can't negotiate with a criminal, and that's just the nonsensical type of policy that Biden and his so-called experts are pursuing. And so we just need to get the right people into the White House who are able to anticipate threats, not react to them. We're constantly in the reactive posture. We need to get ahead of the game. And how do you get ahead of the game? It's you do your job. The primary mission of intelligence is to prevent strategic surprise and to protect the United States from threats. You do that by following very closely those INWs that I just talked about, and then develop the appropriate force posture, the appropriate strategy, the appropriate weapons portfolio. And we're doing it all backwards. We let the war happen, and then how do we defeat them? Well, it's a little bit too late. And so right now, we need to really pay attention to what's going on in China and develop the strategy accordingly. And unfortunately, we don't have the right people in charge. And our commander-in-chief is simply, is just not capable on multiple levels.
Well, let's pray we get some new leadership in 2024 because, Lord knows we need it. Rebecca Koffler, I appreciate your time. Thanks for breaking this all down for us. Always love having you on.
Thank you for having me, and God bless everybody. God bless America. Like you said, let's pray that we get the right people in charge so we can become a normal country and the best country in the world.